It's time to huddle up. I'm Garrett Seawright. This is the Daily Huddle for Sunday, August 27th. We've got a couple of college football games in the rearview mirror now as week zero has came and gone. It was a pretty low key week zero, but we'll talk about that coming up. If you're watching on YouTube, give the College Football at Saturday Glory channel a subscribe. Give a thumbs up to the video. It certainly helps us get in front of more people, and more people talking college football is always a good thing. If you're listening on the podcast, give us a 5-star review and share us with your friends. However you can help us out, it certainly is appreciated. Just a small smattering of games in week zero, but there were some big programs in action, and so we're going to chat about some of those programs. First, the first game of the season, Notre Dame and Navy. Notre Dame looked real good against the midshipmen. Now, when you have 3 games on the schedule against top 10 ranked teams, you have to look good in games against Navy and Tennessee State if you are Notre Dame. You can't struggle because you got expectations. Poll voters, college football playoff committee has expectations for you, and you don't want to be in November looking back at like, oh, remember they only beat Navy 19-13 or whatever. No, 42-3 looks really good. They were dominant. I wonder if that's more about Notre Dame or if that's more about Navy. I saw some people on the old tweet machine saying that Notre Dame's skill position players looked slow, but because of Sam Hartman, who we'll chat about in a second, because of Sam Hartman, they looked a little better because he has the ability to scramble a little bit and extend plays with his feet. That the prevailing thought from some pundits was, hey, Notre Dame's skill position players look slow, and it might be a long season in South Bend. I don't know that that's what I took away. I think it's difficult, one, to judge a week zero game in an international location against a group of 5 opponent. That's just the reality. Navy's going to struggle this year. And I as a college football fan, I will tell you, I am a Navy fan, just because when I was in high school, we ran the flex bone triple option. We didn't run the triple option as much as we just ran the midline option. But when you're like, okay, I want to see someone do this maybe a little better than we do, and Navy was that team, and it was when they were really starting to hit their stride under Ken Niumatalolo that, okay, they are getting better, and it's fun to be on that ride. So I'm a Navy fan. I'm a Hawaii fan. We'll talk about the Rainbow Warriors here in a second, but Navy's going to struggle this year. And just as a college football fan in general, I don't necessarily like to see service academies be not great. That's sort of self-explanatory. So I think it's a mixture of both. I think Notre Dame is at a decently high level in week zero, and Navy is going to struggle. It can be both. It can be that Notre Dame played really well and Navy played really poorly, and it not be an indictment against Notre Dame and it not be an indictment against Navy. Navy's going to have some games that are just not going to be competitive, and they're going to get beat like that, and they'll figure it out, hopefully. Brian Newberry, first-year head coach, got a new offensive coordinator. They came into the game saying, we're going to throw the ball a little bit more than we have in the past, and they threw the ball like 6 times. And they lost by 39. So maybe they're not going to throw the ball more than they have in the past. But Sam Hartman looked phenomenal. And that's a big get for Notre Dame when you don't have, and I've talked about this in the past couple of weeks, of that, Michigan at quarterback doesn't have the question marks that Ohio State and Georgia have, that Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama have. LSU doesn't have the question marks at quarterback like Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama have. Notre Dame doesn't have that question. Sam Hartman played really, really well. 19 of 23, 251 yards, four touchdowns. The last touchdown was textbook, keep the play alive and find somebody as you keep the play alive. He just played really, really well, managed the offense really well. And I know that we live in a world where if you call a quarterback a game manager, that is flat out denigration on somebody. I don't think it necessarily is. because you can still be really good and a really good game manager. If you don't make mistakes with the decisions that you throw the football with, things like that, that's just goes into as much as being a game manager as it does to being a really good college quarterback. And I think Sam Hartman played really well. And if that's the level he's going to play at in week 0, conceivably only going to get better. Now, there will be some trials, tribulations. He'll have some adversity. And there will be some time where somebody will say, oh, why is this guy still the starting quarterback for the Fighting Irish? I'm certain of it. But in your first start at a new school with a new staff, and you play like that, it's encouraging. And encouraging is maybe going to be the word of the day today, because there was some encouraging things for some Power 5 programs in week 0. And there were some encouraging things for the group of 5 schools that played those Power 5 schools. I do think, and I mentioned this last week, I wonder what the future of week 0 looks like if, just for instance, if group of 5 schools in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, due to hurricane season being when it is, say, hey, we want to play in week 0. I also wonder how much potential international games factor in to future week 0. By all, okay, first of all, the number that NBC gave, that I think it was like $159 million of economic impact to Ireland for that game, seems high, but that's just me. That for all the conference realignment decisions have basically happened over TV money. So does it make Fox now has a super broadcast center in Dubai? Do they say to a Big 10 school or a Big 12 school, or they get a Big 12 versus Big 10 school, hey, do you guys want to play in Dubai? We will get the stadium all set up for you. We'll broadcast it, and you get to play in front of a national audience. Because when the premier games of week 0 are Notre Dame and Navy, Vanderbilt, Hawaii, and UMass versus New Mexico State, it's not exactly a gigantic college football slate. Last year, Northwestern and Nebraska played in Ireland on week 0, and it was a pretty big game. It was pretty well watched because you've got 2 Power 5 programs going at it in a conference game in a fun location. I just wonder if there's not a TV company at some point that goes, wait a second, why am I basically punting on the first weekend of college football when there are eyeballs available, and the best we can do is UMass versus New Mexico State, or we can, get Ohio versus San Diego State. Why not back up your investment a little bit in the Big 10, Big 12, SEC, ACC? And I think there are some schools that will say, yeah, we're not playing in Dubai to start a season. Sorry. But there are other schools that will pass up a lot of stuff to get a national TV audience at 3:30 on a Saturday on Fox Broadcast Network. Yeah, you can't tell me that an Indiana, Kansas State live from Dubai doesn't excite the Hoosiers athletic department going, whoa, we get a national audience, and it's not against Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan State, and we're not going to be trounced on national TV. That could be a good thing for us. I don't know, something to think about and just ponder in the future. Don't be surprised if that happens at some point. Keeping with the week 0 overreaction, there was a lot of overreaction to USC's first half performance against San Jose State. Obviously, the Trojans would have loved to have been up more than 21-14 going into the halftime break. Make no qualms about it. But the amount of people that raise this idea that USC doesn't care about defense, how do they continue to employ Alex Grinch? It just doesn't make sense. And until they care about defense, they're not going to be an elite national title contender. And while I agree with that specific sentiment, yes, they are, until they are formidable on defense, and not just like in the Pac 12, but in games against Notre Dame and games against Stanford and games against the biggest schools on their schedule. And when they join the Big Ten, until they can stop Michigan and Ohio State and things like that, yes, that point absolutely stands, that they are not going to be national championship contenders of, maybe not national championship favorites until they solve that. But they are really good offensively. And when you can say in our 12-game schedule, especially with an expanded playoff next year, in our 12-game schedule, how do I feel that we can outscore 11 of our opponents with really not much problem? The answer to that question is yeah. They're going to feel like we can score more points than the other team, so it doesn't necessarily matter if we can stop them. Is that a great thought process to have? Not especially. But until you're forced to do otherwise, why would you? In 2023, if you have a bad offense in college football, it is by choice. Iowa last year offensively stunk because they choose to stink. They choose to continue to play antiquated football. Michigan got their tails kicked in by Ohio State to end every season because Jim Harbaugh was still playing football as if it was 1989. We're going to play with two tight ends, a fullback. Okay, well, Ohio State's defensive line and linebackers for a long time was good enough to stop you, and then they could throw it all over the ball, all over the yard, and you couldn't stop it. So you get beat 62-39, and then Jim Harbaugh says, well, wait a second. We're going to have to figure this out. And so now they play in the shotgun. They got wings. They've got still a power running game out of the shotgun, but they can throw the ball much more effectively than they used to. If you stink at offense in 2023, it's a choice. So USC doesn't stink at offense. They're pretty darn good at it. Being great defensively is difficult. It's hard. And to pretend as if it isn't is, I think, disingenuous. So, yes, in week 0, in the first half, they weren't very good. And that's okay. You don't need to be perfect in week 0. You don't need to be perfect until January. And there's a long time till we get there. So this idea that because oh my goodness, they gave up 21 points in the first half. Oh my gosh. They didn't give up. They scored 21 points and gave up 14. They gave up 14 second quarter points. All right, and they gave up 14 points in the second half. And they won 56-28. It wasn't like this was some barn burner, nail biter. Oh my goodness, is number 6 going down? They were in control the whole game. So the overreaction, I will very rarely try to tread on that. Hey, pump your brakes on this. Pump your brakes on the Alex Grinch is going to get fired because USC is not very good defensively and they're never going to be a national title contender. They're going to be a national title contender this year because they're probably going to get, if they lose one game during the regular season, you still might get a pass out of them, depending on how things shake out and depending on when they lose. But they're not going to be tested for a while. USC, you look at their schedule, they don't play Oregon until Veterans Day. And that's coming off a game against Washington. Really, conceivably, they're not tested until they play Notre Dame the second weekend in October. And who knows what Notre Dame is at that point. So things are not daunting for USC for a while. So even if they continue to stink for the next couple of weeks, they still got time to figure it out. Because if you run down their schedule, they beat San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, Arizona State, Colorado, Arizona. Which one of those 5 games make you go, oh boy, ooh, I don't know. None of them. They got time to figure it out. It's week 0. Got to pump the brakes, temper expectations. Just because Notre Dame played really well against Navy doesn't mean everybody else is going to go, oh my gosh, did you see this, that, the other? That's not how it works for everyone. and that's okay. I will say it is a shame that that game was on the Pac-12 network because that would have had a lot of eyeballs on it. USC is the presumptive Pac-12 representative in the college football playoff. Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy last year. There would have been a lot of eyeballs on that game if it was on Fox or ESPN or whatever, but it's on the Pac-12 network that nobody even in the West Coast gets. So it just was unfortunate because I think there were a lot of people interested in what USC looked like and don't get to see outside of the highlights. But Caleb Williams played well. It's a good start to the Heisman campaign follow-up that if you could hit the ground running a little bit, he threw for 278 yards, couple of touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, complete, I think, 75% of his passes. He played well. And I think that's, you can throw 4 touchdowns in your season opener and be like, okay, you know what? He was able to dissect that San Jose State defense because it's easy, I think, to read your own press clippings and be worried about not getting hurt, being prepared for the NFL draft next year, that rather than being worried about whether you're going to decide to be in a college football video game that comes out next year. We talked about that last week. If you want to check out the Thursday episode of the Daily Huddle, it was ridiculous. But he performed well, and that's what matters most. And then the final game I want to touch on is the Vanderbilt win over Hawaii. Got interesting at the end where the Warriors put together a couple of touchdowns to really climb back in that one. But I told you last week, the Vanderbilt over-under win total, I think, was 3.5. I would hammer it because they got Alabama A&M next week, Wake Forest, UNLV, Kentucky, Missouri, and then it gets pretty difficult on the back half of Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, Auburn, South Carolina, Tennessee. But they got off to a good start with a win over Hawaii, which I think essentially you just have to look at it and say, okay, a win is a win is a win is a win. That there has been some, and I don't know, turmoil is not even the word. There have been some structural questions about Vanderbilt's stadium that was a big topic of conversation was, the stadium is not done and not ready in the end zones. I didn't think it looked that bad on TV, truthfully. Now, the pictures beforehand on social media that made it look as if it was pretty bad. It didn't look as bad on TV. Is it ideal? No. And I think there are some things you can take away from the idea that the season started and Vanderbilt doesn't have their bleep together. It is what it is. I do think it's an encouraging loss for Hawaii. You can play with Vanderbilt to a 7-point loss on the road. Sounds pretty good. Now, obviously, they would want to win, but all things considered, playing a 1-score game when you were, I think, a 17.5-point underdog ain't bad. And that leads me to my next comments of Hawaii coach Timmy Chang made some comments about knowing what the spread was, knowing what their over-under win total was. And it was really refreshing and honest for him to talk about that he said, one of the things we're using to motivate our kids is we're going to Nashville and Vegas thinks we're going to lose by 17.5. Vegas thinks we're only going to win 3 games. Coaches can pretend that they don't know that information, but they do. All of them do. There's no way they don't know that. With even before the explosion of sports gambling, you can pretend that you didn't know. You knew. I know you knew. You know you knew. And when somebody says, hey, what do you think about the spread? Like, I don't even pay attention to that stuff. Yes, you do. Of course you do. You pay attention to everything because you're looking for motivational tactics for your players. You can't say that bulletin board material exists and then not be like, I didn't know that somebody thinks we're only going to win 4 games. Malarkey. Every coach knows. And for Timmy Chang to not sidestep it and to not say, I wasn't aware that we were the underdogs against Vanderbilt. Of course he knew that. So don't spit on my cupcake and tell me it's frosting. He came out and said it. He said, we're favored to lose this game by 17 and a half, and Vegas thinks we're only going to win. Vegas put the over-under at 3.5. So that's what we're using to motivate our guys is, listen, these people don't think you're going to be very good. So I found his comments refreshing because it should be a motivating factor for your players. Hey, a lot of people in the country think you're going to stink. So if we can go on a road and beat an SEC school, it's going to put them on notice. And I think that result, hopefully that result shows that Hawaii's not as far away as they might have looked in the past, because I think a strong Hawaii is fun for college football, that there's a late night game that you can be like, it's fun to watch them. Hawaii producing college football players for other programs is good for college football. So Hawaii being, and I don't even want to use the, Texas is back, which we'll talk about maybe some college football playoff predictions later in the week and how Texas factors into those. Wink, wink. I don't want to say Hawaii is back, because Hawaii's version of back is probably like 9-3, 10-2, 10-3, 9-4. But I think they can be a fun program to follow and watch and pay attention to. And if Washington State and Oregon State are really, honestly, truly wanting to retool the Pac-12, I think Hawaii plays a factor into that more than maybe some people realize. But for him to say, I told our guys what the spread was, I told our guys I know what the over-under is. And he's not saying I told our guys what the spread was to get them to be like, hey, Daddy's got money on the on the 17 and a half. It wasn't that. And I don't believe for a second that factored into it at all. But I do think it's easy to use that as motivation. And so many coaches pretend like they don't know because they're afraid to turn out like the Alabama baseball coach. I don't think you have to worry about that. But they know what it is. And if anybody asks about it, they're like, oh, I hadn't seen that. I didn't know. Yes, you did. And we all know you know. And that's okay. So every Sunday on the Daily Huddle throughout the college football season, we're going to go the Heisman Trophy update. Every Sunday. And you can't start, or you can't go the entire season of Sunday Heisman Trophy updates unless you start early. So we're starting early. So is it ridiculous to have a Heisman Trophy update after week 0? Absolutely. But it's fun. There are just some things that matter a little bit more than the regular season in college football, and the Heisman Trophy, the college football playoff, are in that list. So here are my first 3 placers. If the Heisman Trophy was awarded, the August Heisman Trophy was to be awarded, my winner would be Sam Hartman, the quarterback from Notre Dame. 19-23, 251, 4 touchdowns, in a 42-3 win. Braden Shager of Hawaii played really well last night. And I know that seems ridiculous, but I don't care. It was Braden Shager pitched the ball around the yard and put up a couple of touchdowns to really make that game competitive with Vanderbilt. 351 yards, 3 touchdowns, completed 77% of his passes. And really, I'm half inclined to give him the August Heisman. And then Caleb Williams is going to have a tough time winning the Heisman Trophy again. He just is. He's going to have to be unbelievable. And is that fair? Not especially. It's not fair. But that's just the reality. Is anybody who returns after a Heisman Trophy winning season is going to have to play exponentially better than they did to win the Heisman Trophy the previous season. Because even if it's close, even if he threw 48 touchdowns last year and throws 50 touchdowns this year, there's still going to be somebody that's going to say, Yeah, but I mean, he only threw 50 touchdowns after throwing 48 last year. This guy did XYZ. So Caleb Williams is fighting an uphill battle. He's going to have to fight it all season if he wants to win the Heisman Trophy a second time. I just don't think it's attainable. But I think he might have been the third best player. He might have been the best player. But I think Sam Hartman did it on a bigger stage. And that's half to three quarters the battle. And then I got the little nugget at the end there that I'm not a Heisman Trophy voter, but I'd like to be. So, whoever we got to talk to make that. I've got a bucket list. I'd like to place one vote for the Heisman Trophy some year. So, um, if we can start that campaign, I'm not gonna put a bulletin board. I'm not gonna put a billboard on a couple of buildings in Dallas to get that accomplished, Bo Nix. But I would be willing to put a small ad in a regional newspaper if required. So, Sam Hartman, the August Heisman Trophy winner, congratulations for nothing. So we'll do that every Sunday, the old Sunday Stiffarm Trophy update. And we'll check in throughout the season, and I'll just tell you, hey, here's who would have my Heisman Trophy vote every Sunday. Is it ridiculous? Yes. Yes, it is. But I think it's going to be fun and interesting to watch if just throughout the season, like obviously, if I'll show this again, Braden Shager is not going to appear on this list all that frequently. Just a hunch. Now, things went well for Hawaii, but I'm just guessing that Braden Shager's name, this might be the only time it pops up. So congratulations to him. If he could get the virtual trip to New York, which, the trip from Hawaii to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, probably not great from Hawaii to New York in December. Ugh. But I think it'll just be fun to keep track of, this is where my head is at. And this is where I see this going throughout the college football season. So we'll have the Sunday Stiffarm Trophy update every Sunday here on the Daily Huddle. That'll do it for today's edition of the Daily Huddle. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, give us the thumbs up. Let us know how you think we're doing. Love to interact with you, chat with you, read your comments on the show. And liking and giving the thumbs up and hitting the subscribe button goes a long way in helping us get in front of other college football fans and more fans watching college football. It's always a great thing. If you're listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review, share with your friends, however you can help us out. We certainly do appreciate it. We'll come back Monday, and we've got all sorts of stuff to talk about as the college football season really kicks off with a full slate, and we'll chat about everything happening on the college gridiron right here on the Daily Huddle. I'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks for making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. We'll see.